Plane crash story. The grand departure. The Emirates Airbus A380, a giant of the skies, stood proudly at USA International Airport, preparing for its long-haul journey to New York City. The airport was buzzing with passengers, families hugging their loved ones, and the sounds of boarding announcements echoing through the terminal. Inside the aircraft, 800 passengers settled into their seats, excited for their journey. Business travelers checked emails. Families got comfortable, kids excited for the adventure ahead. Flight attendants moved gracefully, ensuring everyone was seated and ready. In the cockpit, Captain Omar Al-Farsi, a seasoned pilot with over 20 years of experience, went through the final pre-flight checks with his co-pilot, First Officer Adam Reynolds. All systems are green, ready for departure. With a roar of its 4 massive engines, the A380 surged forward, its wheels leaving the runway, climbing effortlessly into the sky. It was supposed to be a routine flight, but fate had other plans. A perfect flight. Until it wasn't. For the first 2 hours, the A380 cruised smoothly at 24,000 feet, gliding over the vast Atlantic Ocean. The seatbelt sign was off, and passengers enjoyed the luxury of Emirates' famous service. Some watched Hollywood blockbusters on their screens. Others enjoyed gourmet meals, sipping champagne and coffee. A few took a nap, trusting in the safety of the world's largest passenger plane. But at exactly 2 hours and 12 minutes into the flight, a deafening explosion shattered the calm. Boom! The left engine detonated, sending a fireball streaking across the sky. Boom! Before anyone could react, the right engine burst into flames as well. A violent tremor rattled the entire aircraft as flames engulfed the wing. The panic in the sky. Inside the cabin, chaos erupted. The overhead compartments shook. The lights flickered, casting eerie shadows across terrified faces. Passengers screamed, some clutching their loved ones, others frozen in shock. Babies wailed, and oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling. "Mayday! Mayday! This is Emirates 409! We have lost 2 engines! Requesting emergency landing!" Captain Omar's calm but urgent voice filled the radio waves as the plane trembled violently. The cockpit was a disaster zone. Warning lights flashed red, the autopilot disengaged, the flight controls felt sluggish. "Captain! We're losing altitude fast!" First Officer Reynolds shouted. The A380 was now a falling giant, plunging from 24,000 feet at an alarming rate. If they couldn't regain control, they would hit the ocean within minutes. The impossible choice. Captain Omar scanned the radar for options. A return to the departure airport was impossible. They were too far out over the Atlantic. The nearest airport? Too distant. The ocean stretched endlessly ahead. If they ditched in the water, the survival rate would be catastrophically low. Then, he saw it. A long stretch of untouched beach, barely 10 miles ahead. A miracle. "Adam, we're landing this plane on that beach." His co-pilot's eyes widened, but he nodded. "It's our only shot. Let's do it." Omar grabbed the intercom. "Brace for impact. We're making an emergency landing. Flight attendants, prepare the cabin." The entire plane held its breath as the massive A380 banked toward the shoreline, a giant burning aircraft heading toward the unknown. The descent into fire. The waves crashed violently as the aircraft approached. The plane was coming in too fast, too heavy, and the engines were still burning. Inside the cabin, passengers were locked in terror. Some clutched their seats so tightly their knuckles turned white. Others whispered prayers, their lips trembling. Parents held their children, hoping for a miracle. The cockpit alarms screamed, but Captain Omar ignored them all. He focused only on one thing, getting the plane down alive. With one final breath, he pulled back on the controls, lifting the nose slightly. Then, the Emirates A380 made contact with the sand. A thunderous impact rocked the entire fuselage. A massive cloud of dust and debris exploded into the air. The plane skidded violently, its left wing tearing through the sand dunes. The screech of metal grinding against the ground filled the air, and then the world went dark. The moment of impact. The Emirates A380 slammed into the sand, its massive weight sinking deep into the soft beach. The left wing dug into the dunes, sending a cloud of dust and debris into the air. Passengers screamed as the plane skidded across the shore, the force jerking them forward. Seats ripped loose, flinging some passengers violently against the walls. The metal fuselage groaned as it struggled under the tremendous force of the landing. The cockpit shook violently. "Come on! Hold together! Hold together!" Captain Omar gritted his teeth, fighting to keep the aircraft straight. The nose gear collapsed, slamming the front of the plane into the sand. A fireball erupted from the left wing, sending thick black smoke billowing into the sky. For a moment, the world was nothing but flames, screams, and destruction. Then, silence. The plane finally stopped, resting at a dangerous tilt, one wing partially buried in the sand. Inside the cabin, survivors coughed through the smoke, their bodies shaking from shock. They had survived the crash landing, but they were not safe yet. Fire and fear. The flames from the left engines continued to rage, creeping dangerously toward the fuel tanks. Captain Omar knew they had minutes, maybe seconds, before the plane could explode. He grabbed the intercom. "This is the captain. Everyone evacuate immediately. Get to the emergency exits now." The flight attendants sprang into action, their training kicking in despite the chaos. Emergency doors burst open and the inflatable slides deployed. Passengers rushed toward the exits, some tripping over debris, others helping the injured. Thick smoke filled the air, stinging their eyes and making it hard to breathe. Outside, the first survivors collapsed onto the sand, gasping for air. But the danger wasn't over. A loud explosion shook the wreckage. The burning wing finally gave in, sending a fireball into the sky. The survivors screamed as flames licked the side of the fuselage. They had to get everyone out, fast. The last passengers, inside the smoke-filled cabin, some passengers were still trapped. An elderly woman struggled to get out of her seat. A young mother desperately tried to wake her unconscious child. A man with a broken leg cried out for help. Captain Omar and his co-pilot Adam didn't hesitate. Rushing down the aisle, they helped the woman to her feet, carrying her toward the exit. A flight attendant scooped up the child, checking his pulse. He was alive but barely conscious. Adam grabbed the injured man, throwing his arm over his shoulder and dragging him toward the emergency slide. One by one, they got the last passengers out. But now the fire was spreading faster than ever. The heat was unbearable, and the cockpit glass shattered from the pressure. Captain Omar was the last man on board. He turned for one final look at his aircraft, the plane that had carried them through fire and chaos, before jumping down the emergency slide. Seconds later, boom! The fuel tanks ignited, sending a massive explosion into the sky. A story for the ages. In the days that followed, the world learned of the incredible survival story. News headlines read, "Miracle on the Sand, how 800 people survived an Airbus A380 Inferno." Emirates Captain Omar Al-Farsi hailed as a hero. Largest plane crash landing ever and no lives lost. Aviation experts called it a miracle. Investigators analyzed the wreckage, determined to find out what caused the twin-engine explosion. Captain Omar and his crew were honored for their bravery and quick thinking. But for the survivors, the memory of that fateful flight would never fade. They would forever remember the moment the sky turned to fire and the miraculous landing that saved them all. The end story.